Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're having a great day. So today is going to be a interesting video, a little bit of a change from some of our normal content, but relational to it. And so we're going to be discussing today universal basic income using blockchain technology and some parallels I've been drawing between that and the Kardashev scale. Now, if you're not familiar with the Kardashev scale, it originates from a scientist in 1964 by the name of Nikolai Kardashev, where he puts together this scale that basically describes various types of advanced civilizations and the scale on which they rank, right? And this is a article written by Harrison Zaritsky, where he goes into detail about the Kardashev scale. Um, and he breaks down the various type of civilizations, right? Now, one question is, since human beings seem to be the only form of life in civilizations we know that exist in the universe that we have definitive proof of. Uh, Many questions are, where do we rank on this scale? And a lot of people give questions or answers rather like we don't even rank number one, because generally the start of the scale or the first defined civilization is a type one, right? And whereas we cover many bases of a type one civilization, which is going to be basically being able to have control over many of our energy resources and communication resources globally. And we've obviously made a great deal of advancement in the last several hundred years. One thing that we don't make the cut on is being able to harness the power, fully harness the power of our star, right? Which is the sun. And then ideas like the Dyson sphere comes into the conversation, whereas these energy conduits wrap around the sun, and we're able to fully use it, right? Whereas now we're barely using solar energy or using our sun efficiently, right? We're still using old decayed fuels like fossil fuels as such, and so on and so forth. But now, in relation to cryptocurrency, right? Where does this relate? Because oftentimes, when we speak of ideas like the Kardashev scale, and where is our rank on the scale in our advancement of civilization, oftentimes what gets left out, I think, in many of these conversations, well, not all the time, but I think is uh, we don't spend enough time on what type of socio-economic systems will exist in this. And I'm drawing these parallels for several reasons. One of which is, I believe, universal basic income, crypto UBIs that are using the blockchain technology to are actually advancing civilization, right? I really believe that universal basic income, and I know a lot of people who have conversations with me about UBI, we end the conversations, and generally it sounds like I'm using universal basic income to pretty much be an answer for everything. You go to equality, it kind of gets that. You go to automation revolutions and job displacement, it kind of gets that. You go to compassion and global concern for your fellow man. UBI kind of touches on that. So it's a very, you go to health and education, and obviously if a man who is not able to eat, he's not able to take care of himself, right? Or be healthy, and so on and so forth. So universal basic income, being able to take care of those basic needs, and I would as well expand those to basic healthcare needs as well. But in having it in that situation like that, you can see where that can go a long way. Uh, but what comes up about the Kardashev scale? And I'm not going to go all of the different types of civilizations. That would be particular about the Kardashev scale, but you get the basic idea. But what I will say is, in relation to cryptocurrency, universal basic income, I could see UBI existing in a type 4 civilization, which is the most advanced, right? And when you're thinking about a type 4 civilization, you're speaking about something that would appear to look like magic to us, where things would just be happening, where these godlike beings would transcend through the universe, right? But the reason I think this is important in relationship to cryptocurrency, why in my brain it just clicked and I start to draw these conclusions, is that um, one big issue with looking at something like the Kardashev scale and considering advanced civilizations, right? Or will cryptocurrency have a handle or a presence in that, which I think it will. I think cryptocurrency will be, integral into going into these more advanced civilizations. But in our transition from what would be a ranking no place on the scale, well, actually that's not true. We do rank a place on the scale, but ranking below a type 1 civilization, this would be, according to popular scientists like Michio Kaku, this would be the most critical part of the transition. As to say, you go back 200-300 years ago, we're a very primitive, cultured group of people, right? Where ideas are being forced on people. We don't have equality. We have religious persecutions. We have slavery. We have child. We don't have child labor laws. Various forms of abuse against women and various things exist, right? So we're not. You just go back a few hundred years. In fact, you don't even have to go back that far. You can go back 50, 60 years, and you see that we're, a very for lack of a better word, backwards group of civilization of people. Even though we have many uh, technological advances, even though we've pretty much went to the moon or went to space, we're still behind on the other parts that make us an advanced civilization. And as I said before, generally, when we think of the Kardashev scale, we think of just dealing with science and energy and communications and things like that. However, and here's a very important, interesting part to all this that I think we need to very much consider. And that is to even make it to a type 1 civilization or a type 2 civilization, right? There has to be something in the mindset of humans, of human beings, that allow us to get that far, right? Along the Kardashev scale, I believe it was Carl Sagan who put us around point 0.7, 0.7, not even a full one on the scale yet, right? And that was back in the 70s, and you get to a present day, and I think we're something like about a 0.73. So we moved up a few points. And again, although we've made great advances in communication, global communication, uh, space exploration, we still aren't in full control and able to use all of our energy sources, right, in our solar system. So that keeps us out of the of being ranked number one. But here's the other part. As we touched on a little bit earlier, moving from 0.7 to a point 0.1 on the cusp of where we have nuclear weaponry, advanced weapons enough to destroy each other with. All right. On that scale, this is going to be the most crucial part to making that leap because we're still closer to the most primitive we were just 200-300 years ago to now coming into this very advanced civilization, right? So what you have there is you have the biggest leap on these scales, right? As to say, once you pass a type 1 civilization and you're going on to type 2, well, it's a lot more conceivable and possible to go from 1 to 2 because the assumption is you're not only more advanced in your thought process, um, you know, in that you're able to avoid nuclear war, that you're able to avoid wiping people out, and that the human race is still alive and not dead, right? And that people would have had to be healthy enough economically to continue to make the scientific advancements, and that had there been a Great Depression or some economic collapse, that it is likely we would have drifted back into the Dark Ages, right? So that means a lot of other things would have had to happen in order to get us there. Now, what type of human beings are able to get from this point to the next, right? That's a special type of human being, right? It is a human being who's learned from past mistakes and what would a system like that look like? Um, so we look at these science fiction shows, right? And science fiction becomes science fact. Many of our inventions have come from science fiction, right? There's a very interesting documentary called "The Science of Star Trek." But what I also find quite interesting is that in these Star Trek depictions and shows and various things, I believe they might be around number three, ranked number three or something. Maybe in the latest ones they're around number four, but they're about as high as you can go. I think the Gene Roddenberry Star Trek, the Star Trek we see where human beings are still kind of aging and still kind of have get sick and get colds and still kind of have problems like we have now. I would take a wild guess. They're suggesting they're probably around a type 3 civilization. But also very interesting is their socio-economic monetary system, right? Where they have these replicators, and it's almost like it's kind of reminiscent of what we're seeing now with like 3D printers. Like it's get to the point where if you need any product or something like that, you just kind of 3D manufacture it, 3D print it out yourself. And now it becomes cheaper, and everybody can have something like that. You can manufacture it yourself. Um, you know, and what happens then when you don't have to buy these items, right? They get cheaper, or you just don't buy them at all. And so now that's more wealth you get to preserve, and you become richer as a result of it. But, in saying all that, and trying to make my point about the combinations of this, or the correlation of this, is that in this Star Trek universe, because of that, the resources able to be produced in this way, which means that everybody has a certain standard of living. In that capacity, then money has become, in a sense, not as important or not important. So what then becomes important, right? People become important, right? Relationships become more important. That's kind of like what happens in a universal basic income system, right? What would probably happen, once people's basic needs are met, then they would probably seek other more important endeavors, right? They probably spend more time in philosophy and family and things of that nature. And the nature of that type of human being, uh, I believe, would be one that ranks on this scale, but it would also be a different human being than what we'd have in what seems to be certain elements of barbarianism. And I won't say all capitalism. There are some elements of capitalism that are good, obviously, right, that have worked for us. But if you really break down certain elements of capitalism, even how we involve capitalism into our cryptocurrency, right? This type of um, uh, uh, kind of dog eat dog, uh, lack of democracy and lack of decentralization, uh, to me, appears to be a system that wouldn't fare well on any of these scales, right? On any part of the scale. Um, Let me put it this way: when you really break down what cryptocurrency has become, or at least the more of the tenets of it, or the principles of it, of being this type of um, decentralized system that is pulling power away from a central authority and giving it back to a more decentralized authority, giving it back to the people, as it were. Right, there's a one common idea that comes up a lot in that, right, and that or word, and that idea is democracy, right. So really, when you say decentralization, oftentimes you're picking democracy as one of the better forms of systems to work with cryptocurrency. For example, again, you go back several hundred years, your monarchs that existed, kings and queens, they may as well control your economic systems. As I say, the king owned all the land and the property. So he controlled all your economic and your social systems. Even your many times they're the head of the church, so he even controlled a lot of your socio religious course of events throughout society. So there was like nothing decentralized or controlled by people. When democracy started to get very popular, and that was what most people choose, and oftentimes the system to a great degree, that's the push. Um, then it would seem to become more decentralized, democratized. So the overall point I'm making is that, and I know a lot of cryptocurrency people love Bitcoin, and they speak of the freedom that Bitcoin is going to bring them. But the reality of the situation is that Bitcoin, from last estimates I were able to collect, is about 87% controlled by 1% of the network. Um, and, 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 and then Bitcoin runs on a very capitalistic model, right? Now, whether that was Satoshi's vision or not, that's what seems to have happened. But now let's just look at more of our forms of government today in relation to this. And I'm going to bring it all home and back to universal basic income in a second. So if you look at our governments, right, you get this government where there, specifically in the United States, we get something like the Congress, where you're going to have basically this representation of the people in a democratized way. As to say, the people uh, participate in the democracy to elect these people, and then they entrusted this smaller group of people with power. That's mostly how governments work, right, or have to run on the more democratic ones. At some point, it's got to be still got to be someone actually performing the task, and that particular group of people have to be given over the power to do it. But in saying all of that, you get up there to Congress, and how many Congress people that if you were able to go up and speak with them, and you were to ask them a question about are they doing a good job and do they deserve a raise? How many would say no, right? So many would probably say, well, I'm doing a good job, and with the power you've given me, we're going to vote with the rest of the Congress to raise our salaries, right? Um, and so they would make that democratic decision, right? Now, uh, my question when we're looking at systems like this, and getting back to crypto UBI, and I hope you're kind of collecting the dots with me as well, where we're trying to show the conflict with certain systems we use in cryptocurrency and certain approaches we take in cryptocurrency in relation to advancing our civilizations forward. Because I'm hoping, I'm assuming that's the overall goal, if there is one. But the point I'm making is that much like those Congress people would probably choose to give themselves a higher salary and would probably tell you they're doing a good job, they believe they are, or I don't think they would say they weren't, or that's the idea to go to Washington D.C. and not do a good job in their minds. um the point I'm making is that under a democratized system, a more decentralized system, who would choose, or would you not choose, the more balanced economy, right? As to say, if we take an example like Bitcoin again, it's 87% controlled by 1%. How many people would vote? How many people would vote to have a system in cryptocurrency like that? And would it be healthy going forth into an advanced civilization where 1% of the wealth is controlled by, I'm sorry, 87% of the wealth is controlled by just 1% of the group, right? No economic system has shown that to be a healthy model. So what I'm trying to impart to many of us in cryptocurrency who maybe haven't sat down and thought about this is that many of the cryptocurrencies we're using, in fact, I think the very idea of cryptocurrency, how we're using it, I think it's failing greatly in a broader idea of maybe what some of even the inventors of cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, Satoshi, wanted. I highly doubt he probably envisioned or wanted a system like how Bitcoin is run today, right? And not only to mention that, um, these systems just aren't healthy, uh, socially, economically, or otherwise, right? So how do we fix that? Like, what's the goal, and what's the end goal, and how do we get to that? And how does UBI do it? Well, UBI seems to touch on many of and when you even look at something like UBI, as soon as you see it, how raise your hand or consider how oftentimes you think futuristic, that this is a futuristic model, that this looks like something you see on a science fiction show where everybody's kind of just walking around and it's almost a cashless society and everybody has their share, right? That's generally what a lot of the hopeful science fiction depictions look like. In other words, the ones you want to be in, they oftentimes look more like a UBI world than look like than an over capitalized world. Because generally, and I could paint the picture for you, anytime we see those kind of distant futures where there are these advanced capitalistic models with more and more production and so on and so forth, what do we see next? We generally see the growth of the powerful corporatist government, right? Where the corporation is the government, right? Where it is corporatism 10.0, and these now mega companies, they're in control of everything, right? That's what generally happens in the crypto model we're using now. Whereas, what do you see with UBI? A more of a utopian like approach. And I know a lot of people don't believe in utopian like ideas, right? I would imagine hundreds of years ago, there were some people walking around saying, well, you know what would be a good system? A system that didn't have slavery in it, right? a system that didn't have slavery in it. And then there was somebody at the time going, yeah, but that's just a dream. We need slaves to run these plantations, to run, to, to survive, to have a better way of life, and without slavery, in their minds, they would probably have thought that that was an impossible goal. Yet here we stand, hundreds of years later, there is no slavery. Um, so, I think in considering it from those aspects, I think that we can come to other conclusions about systems like UBI, but also just how UBI addresses the human being. It makes them the focal point in the entire in an advanced civilization. What do you think people would to get that far, for society to be that healthy, to be that energy efficient, where people aren't basically highway robbing people on energy, jacking up prices, controlling the energy, stopping production, slowing production, just to control the political atmosphere. Uh, how do you see that as an advanced civilization, right? With advanced technology ushers in advanced civilizations. But and I can't prove this, but I think there's a lot of evidence that says it's probably true, and I think some other scientists and sociologists might share my view, and that is that technology may very well be advancing our moral compass. As to say, if you go back years ago, before technology was as good as it was, go back beyond industrial revolution or right at the dawn, people would work their children from sun up to sundown. 5, 7 years old. I've heard the stories. Imagine a 7-year old working 14 hours a day, working from sun up to sundown. Now, of course, as technology moved on, uh, people didn't have to work their kids like that anymore. They could send them to school, right? But technology was the catalyst to stop that, not people, not the mindset of people, right? So I guess the point I'm making is that technology and the type of systems we use will advance us based on what those systems are. And universal basic income seems to fit right in with what I believe would be an advanced civilization of people. Now, that leads up to another interesting question. Does that then mean that if you don't embrace universal basic income, then that your mindset is that of a primitive human being, that you're maybe stuck in gear? Um, well, you know, I think that it's a matter of looking at it similar to the example I just gave. That some people may still be alive today that worked their children from sun up to sundown. And those people today might have a different viewpoint of what it was like back then. Back then, it was probably just normal, the order of the day, and maybe it was even moral, right? It was moral to do it, right? Maybe you kept your kids out of trouble when you worked them. Maybe they grew up to be better human beings. I've heard many of those stories. But then today in our society, we would look at that as probably no less than slave driving, abuse, child abuse, in which why we came up with the child labor laws to stop that kind of thing. And who would be right and who would be wrong? Well, I think that in that particular period of time, the people of that time would argue they were right for the time. But much like they would probably change their view today, we probably would still have to come to the conclusion that even if you don't feel that existed in such systems that are these very winner take all systems, these abusive systems, these badly distributed systems, these centralized wealth systems, even if you don't think they are bad ideas, maybe like that example of a person peering back on their history and looking at it now and saying, well, maybe that wasn't the right system. In fact, we know that's not the right system today. Maybe you're kind of in that space with universal basic income, just maybe. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting take on crypto UBI and the Kardashev scale, something that I strangely find uh, very relational and similar. But if you like content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe. If you like to add, comment to topics like these, please let us know. And don't forget to join our Universal Basic Income program, Bitcoin MYK, which is trying to fulfill some of the ideas that we share with you all on our YouTube channel in hopes to make a better world, a better people. And that maybe through some thought and meditation and contemplation, that you may start to see what we believe is clear as day in front of our faces, but you might begin to see where some of these things might resonate with you, and whereas you might can agree on some of those points, or even come up with ideas why you think they aren't valid points. But that's all I want to say in this video. If you like content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, as always, take care.